The ship hummed softly as it traveled through the stars, its interior bathed in a dim, otherworldly glow. Ellie stood near the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She watched as Erindor shrank into the distance, its toxic jungles and jagged mountains fading into a tiny speck against the vast blackness of space. For the first time in years, she felt unmoored, untethered from the only world she had ever truly known. Ryan sat nearby, his face pale but thoughtful. He stared at the cloaked figure standing silently in the center of the room. The being hadn't spoken since they left Erindor, but its presence filled the ship with an unsettling energy. It was neither hostile nor welcoming, just there, watching them like a silent guardian. "What do you want from us?" Ryan finally asked, breaking the heavy silence. The figure tilted its head slightly, its voice echoing as it replied. "You sought answers. We provide them. But knowledge comes with responsibility." Ellie turned away from the window, her eyes narrowing. "What kind of responsibility? And who are you?" "We are stewards," the figure said simply, "keepers of balance. Your arrival here was not by chance. You have seen what happens when outsiders interfere with worlds like Erindor. It is our duty to ensure such mistakes are not repeated." Ellie's jaw tightened. "So you're saying we were tested?" "Not just tested," the figure corrected. "Evaluated. Both of you carry traits that make you unique. One adapted to survive where others perished. The other brought resources but lacked understanding. Together, you represent two sides of a larger truth." Ryan frowned, leaning forward. "What truth?" "That survival is not enough," the figure said. "To endure is one thing. To thrive requires wisdom and restraint." Ellie stepped closer, her voice sharp. "And now? What happens to us now?" "You will be given a choice," the figure explained. "Return to your respective worlds, or remain as guardians yourselves. Choose wisely. Those who leave must vow never to return to Erindor. Those who stay will dedicate their lives to protecting it." The weight of the decision hung heavily in the air. Ryan looked at Ellie, uncertainty written across his face. "What do we do?" Ellie didn't answer immediately. She thought about Erindor, the harsh beauty of its landscapes, the relentless dangers that had shaped her into who she was. Leaving meant abandoning the only home she had ever known, but staying meant committing to something far greater than herself. She glanced at Ryan, seeing the same conflict reflected in his eyes. "I can't go back," Ellie said finally, her voice steady. "Erindor made me who I am. If staying means keeping it safe, then that's what I'll do." Ryan hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll stay too. I came here looking for answers, but I found something more important. A reason to change. Maybe this is my chance to make things right." The figure regarded them both silently before nodding. "Your choice is accepted. Prepare yourselves. Guardianship is not without sacrifice." As the ship descended toward a distant moon orbiting Erindor, Ellie felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face it alone. Ryan might still be an outsider, but he had proven himself willing to adapt, to learn. Together, they would protect the planet that had tested them both so fiercely. When the ship landed, the hatch opened to reveal a barren yet breathtaking landscape. The air was thin, and the horizon glowed faintly with the light of Erindor's twin suns. Ellie stepped outside first, followed closely by Ryan. Behind them, the ship vanished, leaving no trace of its existence. "This is it," Ryan said quietly, gazing at the horizon. "A new beginning." Ellie nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "For better or worse, we're part of this place now." And as they walked forward, side by side, they knew their journey was far from over. Ellie shrugged, poking at the fire with a stick. "Same as always. Survive. Keep moving. This planet doesn't let you plan too far ahead." "What if there was another way?" Ryan pressed. "What if we could actually get off this rock? Would you go?" Ellie froze, staring into the flames. The question caught her off guard. She had spent so long accepting her fate on Arinder that the idea of leaving felt almost foreign. But deep down, she knew the answer. Maybe, she admitted quietly. But only if it meant keeping this place safe. Only if it meant no one else would come here and mess it up. Ryan smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Fair enough. The next morning, they packed up and resumed their journey. The air was heavy with the promise of an acid rainstorm, and Ellie urged them to move quickly. As they traveled, Ryan began noticing subtle changes in the landscape, patches of scorched earth, strange symbols carved into trees, and faint trails leading deeper into the wilderness. It was as though someone, or something, was guiding them. "Do you see that?" Ryan asked, pointing to a series of markings on a nearby boulder. "It looks like directions." Ellie frowned, inspecting the symbols closely. Could be a trap, or it could lead somewhere important. Ryan hesitated, then glanced at her. "Which way do we go?" Ellie met his gaze, her decision firm. Forward. Always forward. They followed the trail cautiously, unsure of where it would lead. Hours later, they emerged into a clearing dominated by a massive ship. A sleek, metallic vessel unlike anything they had seen before. Its design was alien, yet strangely familiar, as though it belonged to neither Earth nor Arinder. "This wasn't here before," Ellie whispered, her voice tense. "Who built this?" Ryan stepped closer, his device buzzing softly. "I don't know, but it's active, and it's waiting for us." As they approached the ship, a low hum filled the air, and a hatch slid open, revealing a dimly lit interior. Ellie tightened her grip on her knife, every instinct screaming at her to run. But Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression unreadable. "We have to check it out," he said quietly. "It might be our only chance." Ellie hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Together, they stepped inside, the door sealing shut behind them. The ship's interior was cold and sterile, lined with glowing panels and strange equipment. In the center of the room stood a figure cloaked in shadow. "Welcome," the figure said, its voice echoing eerily. "You've made it further than most." Ellie stepped protectively in front of Ryan, her knife raised. "Who are you?" she demanded. The figure tilted its head, studying them. "Observers, protectors, guardians of this world." Before either of them could respond, the ship shuddered violently, lifting off the ground. Ellie stumbled, grabbing onto Ryan for balance. Through the windows, they watched as Arinder grew smaller and smaller below them. "Where are you taking us?" Ryan shouted. "To answers," the figure replied cryptically. "And to consequences." As the ship soared into the sky, Ellie felt a pang of unease. She had survived Arinder for years, but now she was leaving it behind. For better or worse. Whatever awaited them, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The encounter with the glowing spire left both Ellie and Ryan shaken. They had barely escaped with their lives, and the memory of the writhing shadows lingered in their minds like a bad dream. For Ryan, it was a sobering reminder of how little he understood about Arinder, and how dangerous his curiosity could be. For Ellie, it reinforced everything she already knew. The planet didn't tolerate interference. It fought back against anyone who tried to uncover its secrets. As they trudged through the jungle, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the crater, Ellie noticed a change in Ryan. He was quieter now, more subdued. The reckless determination that had driven him toward the spire seemed to have faded, replaced by a cautious humility. She wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or concerned. On one hand, his newfound caution might keep them alive longer. On the other, she couldn't afford for him to lose his edge entirely. "We need to find shelter," Ellie said finally, breaking the silence. "We've been moving nonstop since yesterday. If we don't rest soon, we'll make mistakes." Ryan nodded, though his movements were sluggish. "Yeah, you're right." They found a small cave tucked into the side of a hill, partially hidden by thick vines. It wasn't ideal, Caves often housed predators, but it would do for the night. Ellie checked the area carefully before signaling for Ryan to follow her inside. Once they were settled, she lit a small fire using dry leaves and twigs, its faint glow casting flickering shadows on the walls. "You okay?" she asked after a while, glancing at Ryan. His face was pale, and he stared blankly into the flames. "I'm fine," he muttered, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated, then sighed. "About why I'm here. About Earth. About everything." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "I came here thinking I could fix things. Thinking I could bring something valuable back home. But all I've done is cause trouble. For you, for this planet. Maybe I should just leave it alone." Ellie studied him for a moment, her expression softening slightly. "You can't undo what's already been done," she said simply. "But you can decide what happens next. That's all any of us can do." Ryan nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "What about you? What happens next for you?" The discovery of the hidden facility weighed heavily on both Ellie and Ryan as they continued their journey. The journal's words echoed in Ellie's mind, reminding her of the futility of trying to tame Erinder. She had known it instinctively all along. The planet didn't yield to anyone, but seeing proof of past failures made it impossible to ignore. Still, she pushed forward, driven by a stubborn determination to survive. Ryan, on the other hand, was quieter than usual. He seemed lost in thought, replaying the things they'd found in the facility over and over in his mind. The coordinates etched into the walls nagged at him, refusing to let go. If they could decode them, he believed they might find something valuable, perhaps even a way to repair his ship or call for help. But Ellie's warnings about traps and dangers lingered in the back of his mind, making him hesitate. One evening, as they set up camp near a shallow stream, Ryan finally broke the silence. "What if we followed those coordinates?" he asked cautiously, glancing at Ellie. "It could lead us somewhere useful." Ellie looked up from sharpening her knife, her expression unreadable. "Useful how? Another ruin full of dead ends. Or worse, another predator den." "I don't know," Ryan admitted, "but staying here isn't getting us anywhere. You said yourself that my ship is beyond repair. We need options." Ellie sighed, setting the knife aside. "Options are one thing. Walking blindly into danger is another. Those coordinates could take us straight into trouble, or deeper into this planet's nightmare." Ryan leaned forward, his tone earnest. "I get it. I do. But think about it. We've already come so far. What if there's something out there that can actually help us? Something worth risking it for?" Ellie studied him for a moment, weighing his words. She hated to admit it, but he had a point. Staying put meant waiting for death to find them, whether through starvation, predators, or the planet itself. Moving forward, at least towards something tangible, was better than standing still. "Fine," she said finally, her voice firm. "We'll follow the coordinates, but we stick together, no matter what. And if things go south, we turn back immediately." "Understood." Ryan nodded quickly. "Understood." The next morning, they set out with renewed purpose. Using Ryan's salvage device and Ellie's knowledge of the terrain, they navigated toward the location marked by the coordinates. The journey was grueling, taking them through dense jungles, across treacherous ravines, and into areas where the air felt unnaturally cold. Every step felt heavier, as though the planet itself was resisting their progress. After 2 days of relentless travel, they arrived at their destination. What they found was unlike anything either of them had expected. A massive crater surrounded by jagged cliffs, its center glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. In the middle of the crater stood a towering structure, a spire of black metal that pulsed with energy, its surface covered in intricate patterns that shifted and shimmered like liquid. "What is this place?" Ryan whispered, his voice filled with awe. Ellie shook her head, gripping her knife tightly. "I don't know, but it doesn't feel right." As they approached cautiously, the ground beneath their feet began to hum softly, vibrating in time with the pulsing light. Ryan reached for his device, scanning the area. "There's some kind of energy field here," he muttered. "It's incredible." Before Ellie could respond, the spire suddenly flared brighter, bathing the entire crater in a blinding glow. A low rumble echoed through the air, growing louder with each passing second. Then, without warning, the ground split open, revealing a deep chasm filled with writhing shadows. Ellie grabbed Ryan's arm, pulling him back. "We need to leave. Now." But Ryan resisted, staring at the spire with wide eyes. "No, this could be our chance. It's reacting to us. It knows we're here." "Ryan," Ellie shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. "Whatever this is, it's not safe. Trust me." For a moment, Ryan hesitated, torn between curiosity and fear. But when the shadows began to rise from the chasm, twisting into monstrous shapes, he realized she was right. Together, they turned and ran, dodging falling rocks and bursts of energy as the spire roared behind them. They didn't stop until they were miles away, collapsing onto the ground in exhaustion. Ryan looked back toward the direction they had come from, guilt and frustration written across his face. "I thought it was a way out," he said quietly. Ellie placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice steady. "Sometimes, the hardest part of surviving is knowing when to walk away." And for the first time, Ryan truly understood what she meant. The days that followed were tense and exhausting. Ellie and Ryan continued their search for supplies, scavenging what they could from the wreckage of the ship and nearby ruins. Each day brought new challenges. Acid rainstorms forced them to take shelter under rocky overhangs, while packs of predators stalked them through the jungle. But despite the constant danger, Ellie noticed something unexpected. Ryan was improving. He still wasn't as skilled as she was at navigating Arinder's harsh environment, but he was learning quickly. He started paying closer attention to her movements, mimicking how she handled her knife or checked for traps in the terrain. When they encountered hostile creatures, he no longer froze in fear. Instead, he fought back with determination, using makeshift weapons crafted from salvaged materials. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One afternoon, as they trekked through a dense thicket, Ellie spotted something unusual, a strange structure partially buried beneath layers of moss and vines. She stopped abruptly, signaling for Ryan to do the same. "Wait," she whispered, pointing ahead. "Do you see that?" Ryan squinted, trying to make out the shape through the foliage. "Looks like some kind of building," he said cautiously. "Old, though." Ellie nodded. "Could be another ruin. Might be worth checking out." They approached carefully, clearing away vines and debris to reveal a heavy metal door covered in rust. Ellie tested it with her foot, finding it surprisingly sturdy. With Ryan's help, they managed to pry it open just enough to slip inside. The air inside was cool and damp, carrying the faint smell of decay. Faint beams of light filtered through cracks in the ceiling, illuminating rows of dusty shelves and broken equipment. "This place has been here for years," Ellie murmured, running her fingers over a cracked control panel. "But someone kept it hidden." Ryan wandered deeper into the room, his eyes scanning the walls. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a series of faded symbols etched into the metal. "These markings, they're not random. They're coordinates." Ellie joined him, studying the symbols closely. "Coordinates for what?" "I'm not sure," Ryan admitted. "But if we can decode them, they might lead us to something important. Maybe even a way off this planet." Ellie frowned, skeptical. "Or maybe it's a trap. We don't know who left this behind, or why." Ryan didn't argue. He knew better than to dismiss her caution, especially after everything they'd been through. Still, the discovery intrigued him. As they explored further, they found more clues, maps, data logs, and fragments of old technology scattered throughout the facility. It became clear that whoever had built this place had been conducting experiments on Arinder long before Ellie's colony arrived. "They were trying to change the planet," Ryan said, holding up a damaged screen displaying graphs and charts. Terraforming. That's what all this is about. Ellie's expression darkened. And look how well that turned out. The colony failed because of people like you, people who thought they could control nature. Ryan opened his mouth to respond but stopped himself. He couldn't deny her point. The evidence around them told a grim story. Abandoned projects, failed attempts, and countless lives lost in the pursuit of domination over Erinder's unforgiving landscape. As they sifted through the remains of the facility, Ellie stumbled upon something that made her pause. A small journal tucked away in a corner. Its pages were brittle and yellowed, but the handwriting inside was still legible. She flipped through it silently, her brow furrowing as she read. "What is it?" Ryan asked, noticing her reaction. "It's personal accounts," Ellie replied softly. "From someone who lived here. They talk about others, survivors, who vanished. Some left, some died, but none stayed." She looked up at Ryan, her voice tinged with sadness. "This place isn't just a lab. It's a graveyard." Ryan didn't say anything. He simply stood there, staring at the journal in her hands. For the first time, he began to truly understand the weight of what they were dealing with. Erinder wasn't just dangerous. It was haunted by the ghosts of those who had tried and failed to conquer it. "We should go," Ellie said finally, closing the journal. "There's nothing here for us." Ryan nodded, following her toward the exit. As they stepped back into the jungle, the oppressive heat hit them like a wall. But neither of them spoke. Both were lost in thought, grappling with the realization that survival on Erinder meant more than just staying alive. It meant accepting the planet for what it was, and knowing when to leave its secrets buried. After the attack, Ellie and Ryan retreated to a safer spot near the wreckage. The adrenaline from the fight was wearing off, leaving both of them drained. Ellie sat on a rock, cleaning her knife with deliberate movements. Her hands were steady, but there was a flicker of frustration in her eyes as she glanced at Ryan. "You're not cut out for this," she said bluntly. "If we keep running into trouble, you'll end up dead." Ryan didn't argue. He leaned against the side of the damaged ship, his breathing still uneven. His hands trembled slightly as he wiped dirt and blood from his face. "I know," he admitted quietly, "but I don't have a choice. I can't stay here, and I can't go back without help." Ellie sighed, putting her knife away. She had seen enough to know that Ryan wasn't lying about being out of his depth. Still, his presence complicated things. On Erinder, survival was hard enough alone. Adding someone who needed constant protection made it nearly impossible. "We need to figure out what's salvageable from your ship," she said after a pause. "If we can find anything useful, it might give us an edge." Ryan nodded and stood up, wincing as he moved. Together, they returned to the wreckage, searching through the debris more carefully this time. Ellie focused on practical items, tools, weapons, anything that could aid their survival. Ryan, however, seemed drawn to a small compartment near the cockpit. When he opened it, his expression changed. "What's that?" Ellie asked, noticing the shift in his demeanor. Ryan pulled out a sleek device, no bigger than his hand. It glowed faintly, its surface smooth and metallic. "It's classified," he said hesitantly. "But it's important. If I can get it working, it might help us contact my team." Ellie frowned. "You didn't mention this before." "I didn't think it mattered," Ryan replied quickly. "Look, I'm telling you now because I trust you. But you need to understand. I'm not just an explorer. I'm part of Earth's military. My mission here wasn't just about mapping planets." Ellie crossed her arms, her suspicion growing. "So what was it? What are you really doing here?" Ryan hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "We were sent to study planets like this one. Harsh environments, extreme conditions. The goal is to learn how to adapt humans to survive in places like Erinder." "But also," he trailed off, looking uneasy. "Also what?" Ellie pressed. "Also to see if these planets can be used for resources," Ryan admitted reluctantly. Earth needs materials to rebuild after the wars. Places like Erinder have rare minerals that could make a big difference. Ellie stared at him, her jaw tightening. You mean you're here to exploit this planet? To take what you need and leave? No, Ryan insisted. That's not how it works. We're careful. We try to minimize damage. And besides, nothing's been decided yet. This is just research. Ellie shook her head, anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. This planet has already been destroyed once. People came here thinking they could tame it. And look what happened. They died. Everyone dies here eventually. She pointed at the jungle surrounding them. Erinder doesn't forgive mistakes. Ryan looked down, guilt written across his face. I didn't know, he said softly. I swear, I didn't realize how bad it was until I got here. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of Ryan's revelation hung heavy in the air. Ellie wanted to walk away, to leave him to fend for himself, but she knew that wasn't an option. As much as she disliked him, she couldn't deny that he needed her help. And maybe, just maybe, his technology could offer her something in return. Fine, Ellie said finally, breaking the silence. But if you're staying, you follow my rules. No secrets, no lies. And if you try to hurt this planet, or me, you won't live long enough to regret it. Ryan nodded earnestly. You have my word. I won't let you down. Ellie turned away, not fully convinced but willing to give him another chance. For now, they had work to do. The suns were beginning to set, casting long shadows over the wreckage. She motioned for Ryan to gather what they'd salvaged and head back toward the jungle. We'll camp farther away tonight, she instructed. Those creatures will come back if they smell blood. We need to stay ahead of them. As they packed up and moved deeper into the forest, Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan's presence was going to change everything. Whether that change would be good or bad remained to be seen. The next morning, Ellie woke before the suns had fully risen. She moved quietly, checking her gear and making sure everything was ready for the journey ahead. Ryan stirred as she packed up the camp, groaning softly as he sat up. His face was pale, and dark circles under his eyes made him look even more exhausted than the day before. You don't look good, Ellie said bluntly, tossing him a bottle of water. Drink that. We've got a long walk ahead. Ryan nodded weakly and took a sip, wincing as the cold liquid hit his throat. I'll manage, he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. He tried to stand but stumbled slightly, catching himself on a nearby tree trunk. Ellie watched him with a mix of annoyance and concern. If you slow me down, I'll leave you behind, she warned. This isn't Earth, and I'm not here to babysit. Ryan forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Got it. No slowing down. They set off shortly after, heading north toward the coordinates Ryan had given her for his crashed ship. The terrain grew rougher as they traveled, with jagged rocks and thick vines blocking their path. Ellie moved with practiced ease, cutting through obstacles with her knife and navigating the uneven ground without hesitation. Ryan, however, struggled to keep up. Every step seemed to sap what little energy he had left, and his breathing grew heavier with each passing hour. By midday, the heat of the twin suns bore down on them mercilessly. Sweat dripped from Ryan's forehead, and his movements became slower and more deliberate. Ellie stopped occasionally to let him rest, though she made it clear they couldn't afford to waste too much time. We're close, Ryan said finally, pointing ahead. Through the dense foliage, Ellie could see the glint of metal reflecting sunlight. They pushed forward, reaching the edge of a clearing where the wreckage of Ryan's ship lay embedded in the side of a rocky hill. The vessel was badly damaged, its hull scorched and twisted from the crash. Smoke still rose faintly from parts of the engine, and debris littered the surrounding area. Ellie surveyed the scene with a critical eye. This doesn't look repairable, she said flatly. Even if we fix the engine, I doubt it'll fly again. Ryan's shoulders slumped, but he didn't argue. Instead, he walked over to the ship and began rummaging through the remains, searching for anything useful. Ellie joined him, inspecting the control panels and compartments. Most of the equipment was ruined, but she managed to salvage a few tools and spare parts. As they worked, tension simmered between them. Ryan seemed frustrated and distracted, often snapping at Ellie when she asked questions about the ship's systems. She, in turn, grew impatient with his lack of practical knowledge. "You said you were trained for survival situations," Ellie remarked sharply as Ryan fumbled with a piece of machinery. "You don't act like it." "I told you, I'm not an engineer," Ryan shot back. "I'm a soldier. My job is to follow orders, not fix spaceships." Ellie rolled her eyes. "Great, so what exactly are you good at?" Before Ryan could respond, a low growl echoed through the clearing. Both of them froze, turning toward the sound. From the shadows of the jungle emerged a pack of creatures, large, wolf-like beasts with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp teeth. Their fur bristled as they crouched, ready to pounce. "Stay behind me," Ellie ordered, pulling out her knife. Ryan hesitated, panic flashing across his face. "There's too many of them," he exclaimed. Ellie ignored him, her focus entirely on the predators. She knew these creatures well. They were fast and aggressive, but they weren't invincible. As the first beast lunged, she sidestepped and struck with precision, driving her blade into its side. It yelped and retreated, giving her just enough time to prepare for the next attack. Ryan, meanwhile, scrambled for something to defend himself with. He grabbed a sharp piece of metal from the wreckage, holding it awkwardly as another creature charged at him. Ellie shouted a warning, but he barely managed to deflect the blow, stumbling backward. "Focus," Ellie yelled, taking down another beast. "If you freeze, you're dead." The fight was chaotic, but Ellie's experience gave her the upper hand. One by one, the creatures fell back, retreating into the jungle. When the last of them disappeared, Ellie turned to Ryan, who was shaking and covered in dirt. "You're lucky I was here," she said coldly. "If I hadn't been, you'd be dead already." Ryan didn't respond. He simply stared at her, a mixture of shame and gratitude in his eyes. For the first time, he realized just how much he depended on her, and how unprepared he truly was for Irindor. The journey back to Ellie's camp was slow and tense. Ryan struggled to keep up, his movements clumsy and unsteady. Every step seemed to drain him further, and Ellie could tell he wasn't used to the harsh conditions of Irindor. She walked ahead, occasionally glancing over her shoulder to make sure he hadn't fallen too far behind. The planet didn't wait for anyone, and she couldn't afford to waste time babysitting him. "You're quiet," Ryan said after a while, his voice strained from exertion. "Do you always travel like this?" Ellie didn't look at him. "Like what?" "Alone." She shrugged. "It's safer that way. People tend to get themselves killed out here." Ryan frowned but didn't press the issue. He knew better than to argue with someone who clearly had more experience surviving on this unforgiving world. Still, the silence between them was uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being around others, especially not someone as guarded as Ellie. But he needed her help. For now, that meant keeping his mouth shut and doing as she said. As they moved through the dense jungle, Ellie kept a sharp eye out for danger. The predators of Irindor were always watching, waiting for an opportunity to strike. She signaled for Ryan to stop and crouched low, scanning the area ahead. A faint rustling in the bushes caught her attention, and she raised her knife instinctively. Ryan froze, his eyes wide with fear. "What is it?" he whispered. "Stay still," Ellie replied softly, her gaze fixed on the source of the noise. Slowly, a small creature emerged, a scrawny, lizard-like animal with glowing eyes. It sniffed the air cautiously before darting back into the underbrush. Ellie relaxed slightly and stood up. "Just a scavenger," she muttered. "Nothing to worry about." Ryan exhaled sharply, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You handle that kind of thing often." "Every day," Ellie said bluntly. "If you're going to survive here, you'll need to learn how to deal with worse than that." Ryan nodded weakly, though the thought made him uneasy. He had never imagined a place like Erindor existed, let alone that he'd end up stranded on it. Back on Earth, he had been trained for survival situations, but nothing had prepared him for this. The planet felt alive, almost hostile, as if it resented their presence. By the time they reached Ellie's camp, the suns were setting, casting long shadows across the landscape. Her shelter was simple, a lean-to made of salvaged materials, but it provided enough protection from the elements. Ellie gestured for Ryan to sit while she unpacked her supplies. She handed him a bottle of water and a packet of dried food. "Eat," she instructed. "You look like you haven't had anything decent in days." Ryan accepted the items gratefully, tearing into the food with surprising hunger. As he ate, Ellie studied him carefully. There was something off about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. His story about being from Earth seemed plausible, but there were gaps. Why had his ship crashed? What exactly was he doing so far from home? "You said you were part of an exploration team," Ellie began, her tone casual. "What were you exploring?" Ryan hesitated, chewing slowly. "Uncharted planets," he said finally. "We were mapping regions of space near Earth's colonies. This sector wasn't supposed to be dangerous." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "And yet here we are." Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, something went wrong during the mission. I don't know what happened. Communications failed, and then the ship malfunctioned. Next thing I knew, I woke up here." Ellie didn't respond immediately. She wanted to believe him, but trust didn't come easily to her. On Erindor, lies could cost you your life. Still, she decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. For now. "We'll head to your ship tomorrow," she said. "If it's repairable, I'll see what I can do. But don't expect miracles." Ryan nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I know I'm asking a lot." Ellie turned away, busying herself with organizing her gear. "Don't thank me yet," she muttered. "We've got a long way to go." As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply. Ryan shivered, wrapping his arms around himself. Ellie tossed him a thin blanket. "Get some rest," she advised. "Tomorrow's going to be rough." Ryan lay down on the hard ground, staring up at the stars visible through gaps in the clouds. They reminded him of home, but the thought brought little comfort. He was millions of miles away from everything familiar, stranded on a planet that seemed determined to kill him. And yet, for the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. If anyone could help him escape this nightmare, it was Ellie Carter. Ellie stared at the man in the doorway, her grip tightening on the knife. His voice was calm, but she didn't trust him. On Erindor, calm often meant danger. She took a step back, putting more distance between them. The faint hum of the console behind her filled the silence as she studied him carefully. Ryan Brooks looked nothing like the people she had known from the colony years ago. His clothes were clean and well-made, unlike her patched-up jacket and worn boots. He carried no visible weapons, but that didn't mean he wasn't dangerous. His face was pale, almost sickly, and he moved with a stiffness that suggested injury or exhaustion. Still, there was something about him, something foreign, that made her uneasy. "You're not from here," Ellie repeated slowly, her tone sharp. "Where are you from?" Ryan hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "I'm from Earth," he said finally. "I was part of a team sent to explore this region of space. My ship crashed." Ellie's eyes narrowed. Earth? She had heard stories about it when she was younger, tales of a distant planet where humans lived without fear of acid rain or monstrous beasts. But those stories always felt like myths, too good to be true. And now, standing in front of her, was someone claiming to come from that world. It was hard to believe. "Why should I trust you?" she asked bluntly. "You could be lying. Or worse." Ryan nodded, as if he expected her suspicion. "I don't blame you for being cautious," he said, "but I'm not your enemy. I just need help fixing my ship so I can leave this place. If you assist me, I'll make sure you're compensated." Ellie scoffed. "Compensated? With what? Money doesn't mean anything here. She gestured around the room. This is Irindor. Out here, survival is the only currency that matters. Ryan looked taken aback by her response, but he didn't argue. Instead, he glanced at the console behind her. That device. It's transmitting a signal. It must have been what drew you here. Do you know how it works? No, Ellie admitted. But it's not important right now. What's important is figuring out whether I can trust you. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the air was thick, and Ellie's mind raced with questions. Could Ryan really be telling the truth? Was he truly from Earth? And if he was, why had his ship crashed on Irindor of all places? Most importantly, what did he want from her? Finally, Ryan broke the silence. Look, I understand your hesitation, he said, but we don't have much time. The environment here is hostile, and I'm injured. If we don't work together, neither of us will last long. Ellie considered his words. He was right about one thing. Irindor was unforgiving. Even someone like her, who had spent years adapting to its dangers, couldn't afford to make mistakes, and Ryan clearly wasn't equipped to handle this planet on his own. His lack of proper gear and obvious weakness made him an easy target for predators and for the elements. Still, helping him came with risks. If he turned out to be a threat, she would have to deal with him quickly. But if he was telling the truth, assisting him might give her access to resources she had never dreamed of. Tools, technology, maybe even a way off this cursed planet. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Leaving Irindor had never seemed possible before. All right, Ellie said after a pause, lowering her knife slightly. I'll help you, for now. But if you try anything, I won't hesitate to stop you. Ryan raised his hands again, a gesture of surrender. Fair enough, he said. I'm not looking for trouble. I just want to get home. Ellie nodded but kept her guard up. She motioned for him to follow her out of the structure. We'll head back to my camp, she explained. It's safer there than staying out in the open. Once we regroup, we can figure out our next move. As they stepped outside, the harsh light of the twin moons illuminated the barren landscape. Ryan winced, shielding his eyes from the brightness. Ellie noticed his discomfort and smirked. Welcome to Irindor, she said dryly. Hope you brought sunscreen. Despite herself, she felt a flicker of curiosity about this stranger. Earth sounded like a dream, a world without monsters or storms, but she knew better than to let hope cloud her judgment. For now, Ryan was just another challenge to overcome, and on Irindor, challenges were nothing new. Ellie sat cross-legged on the cold, cracked floor of the ruined building. Her backpack lay open beside her, its contents spread out in front of her. A half-empty water bottle, a few packets of dried food, and some basic tools were all she had to her name. She picked up the handheld scanner again, turning it over in her hands. It was an old piece of equipment, battered and scratched from years of use, but it still worked well enough. She powered it on and watched as the small screen lit up with faint green lines. The device hummed softly as it scanned for signals or anomalies within range. Ellie wasn't expecting much. She rarely found anything useful, but checking was part of her routine. Survival depended on staying informed, even if the information was usually disappointing. As she waited for the results, her thoughts drifted back to the jungle outside. Somewhere out there, unseen dangers lurked, waiting for their next victim. But not tonight. Tonight, she was safe, at least for now. The scanner suddenly beeped, jolting her out of her thoughts. Ellie frowned and leaned closer to examine the screen. There it was, a faint signal, barely visible against the static. At first, she thought it might be interference from the storm clouds overhead, but the signal was steady and rhythmic. Too regular to be natural. Her heart began to race. This was different. This was something new. For a moment, Ellie hesitated. Following strange signals was risky, especially on Irindor. They could lead to traps set by predators or remnants of ancient technology that might malfunction and cause harm. But at the same time, they could also mean supplies, shelter, or even answers. And after so many years of solitude, the idea of finding something, or someone, was too tempting to ignore. She stuffed the scanner into her bag and quickly repacked her belongings. The signal was weak, meaning its source was far away. If she wanted to investigate, she would need to move fast. The acid rain season was approaching, and once it started, traveling would become nearly impossible. Ellie slung her backpack over her shoulders and stood up, glancing around the room one last time. She didn't like leaving a safe spot without knowing what lay ahead, but staying put wouldn't get her anywhere either. Outside, the wind had picked up, rustling the leaves of the nearby trees. The sky was dark, with only a faint glow from the planet's twin moons providing light. Ellie adjusted her hood to shield herself from the chill and started walking north, the direction the scanner indicated. Each step felt heavier than usual, weighed down by both her gear and the uncertainty of what she might find. Still, she pressed on, her determination outweighing her fear. As she traveled deeper into the wilderness, the landscape grew more treacherous. Jagged rocks jutted out of the ground like broken teeth, forcing her to pick her way carefully across uneven terrain. Thick vines hung low from the trees, tangling around her legs if she wasn't careful. Ellie kept her knife close, ready to cut through any obstacles, or defend herself if needed. Hours passed, and the signal grew stronger. Ellie checked the scanner periodically, making sure she was heading in the right direction. By dawn, she reached the base of a steep hill. At the top, she spotted the remains of a structure partially buried in the dirt. It looked ancient, its metal frame corroded and covered in moss. But what caught her attention was the faint hum coming from inside. Whatever was generating the signal, it was here. Ellie climbed the hill cautiously, her eyes darting around for signs of danger. Reaching the entrance, she paused, listening intently. The hum continued, steady and mechanical. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, illuminated only by cracks in the ceiling where sunlight filtered through. In the center of the room stood a large console, blinking faintly with lights. The signal was coming from this device. But before Ellie could inspect it further, a noise behind her made her freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoed through the space. She turned sharply, gripping her knife tightly. Standing in the doorway was a figure silhouetted by the morning light, human-shaped, but unlike anyone she had ever seen. Their clothing was strange, sleek and unfamiliar, and they carried themselves with an air of confidence that seemed out of place on Arindor. "Who are you?" Ellie demanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The figure raised their hands slowly, showing they weren't armed. "My name is Ryan Brooks," they said in a calm tone. "I'm not from here." Ellie's mind raced. Not from here. What did that mean? Was this person another survivor, or something else entirely? Ellie Carter moved quietly through the dense jungle, her boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and every step she took seemed to echo in the eerie silence. She had been walking for hours, but she didn't feel tired. Years of surviving on Arindor had taught her how to push past exhaustion. This planet, her home, was not kind to anyone. It didn't matter if you were strong or smart. Arindor demanded everything from you, and even then, it still might take your life. The sun above was hidden behind a thick layer of clouds that never seemed to break. Acid rain could start at any moment, and Ellie knew she needed to find shelter soon. She scanned the area, her sharp eyes picking out the shapes of twisted trees and strange plants that glowed faintly in the dim light. Everything here was dangerous. Some plants could poison you with a single touch, while others could trap you in their sticky vines. Even the animals weren't normal. They were bigger, faster, and far deadlier than anything she had ever seen before. Ellie paused for a moment, pulling a small device from her belt. It was a scanner, one of the few tools she had managed to salvage over the years. She turned it on and waited as it hummed softly, searching for signs of nearby threats. The screen flickered, showing nothing unusual. Satisfied, she tucked it back into place and continued moving forward. She wasn't sure where she was going. There was no real destination anymore. Surviving on Arinder meant constantly moving, always staying one step ahead of whatever danger lurked around the corner. Ellie had learned early on that staying in one place too long was a death sentence. The predators here were relentless, and they always found you eventually. As she walked, her mind wandered back to the past. She remembered the first time she realized she was alone. It had been years ago, when she was just a child. Her parents had brought her to Arinder, hoping to start a new life on what they thought was an unexplored paradise. But the planet had other plans. Within weeks, the colony fell apart. People disappeared, buildings burned, and the once promising settlement became a graveyard. Ellie's parents were among the first to die, leaving her to fend for herself. At first, she didn't think she would survive. She was scared, hungry, and completely unprepared for the horrors of Arinder. But something inside her refused to give up. Slowly, she adapted. She learned which plants were safe to eat and which ones would kill her. She figured out how to avoid the giant beasts that roamed the forests. And most importantly, she discovered how to fight back when cornered. Over time, Ellie stopped being afraid. Fear only slowed you down, and on Arinder, hesitation meant death. Now, years later, she was still alive. She didn't know why fate had spared her when so many others had perished. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was something else. Whatever the reason, Ellie didn't question it. All she knew was that she was different, not just from the people who had come to Arinder, but from everyone. She had faced the worst this planet could throw at her, and she had survived. That made her special. But sometimes, late at night when the acid rain pounded against the roof of whatever makeshift shelter she had found, Ellie wondered if there were others like her, other survivors who had somehow managed to live through the nightmare of Arinder. She tried not to dwell on those thoughts too much. Hope was dangerous. On a planet like this, hope could get you killed. Still, the idea lingered in the back of her mind, a tiny spark she couldn't quite extinguish. For now, though, Ellie focused on the present. She reached the edge of the jungle and stepped into a clearing. In the distance, she could see the remains of an old building, its walls crumbling and covered in moss. It looked abandoned, but appearances could be deceiving on Arinder. Ellie tightened her grip on the knife strapped to her side and moved closer. If there was anything useful inside, she needed to find it before the rain started. She took a deep breath and entered the ruins, her senses on high alert. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every sound echoed louder than it should. But Ellie didn't flinch. This was her world, and she knew how to survive in it.